You are not stuck. You have never been stuck. And somewhere beneath the story, you keep telling yourself, you already know this. But knowing and admitting are two very different things. One lets you sleep at night. The other keeps you awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of a truth you are not quite ready to hold. So let me say it plainly, because no one else will. The life you are living right now is not happening to you. It is being chosen by you. Every single day. Through action, through inaction, through the thousand small decisions that feel automatic but are not. You are not trapped in circumstances. You are loyal to them. And there is a profound difference between those two things that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Think about that word. Loyalty. It carries such positive connotations, does it not? We admire loyalty. We value it. We consider it a virtue. But loyalty to what? Loyalty to whom? When you examine your life closely, when you look at the patterns you keep repeating, the situations you keep recreating, the outcomes you keep manifesting despite claiming you want something different, what you find is not imprisonment. What you find is fidelity, a deep, unconscious allegiance to a particular way of being that once made sense but no longer does. You are being faithful to an old agreement, a contract you signed with yourself so long ago you have forgotten you signed it. The terms seemed reasonable at the time. They seemed necessary. Stay small and stay safe. Do not risk too much and you will not lose too much. Keep your expectations modest and you will not be disappointed. Play the role assigned to you and you will be accepted, loved, allowed to belong. These agreements were not made frivolously. They were survival strategies, intelligent adaptations to environments that required them. The child who learned not to speak up because speaking up brought punishment. The teenager who learned not to shine too brightly because brightness attracted cruelty. The young adult who learned not to want too much because wanting led to heartbreak. These were not character flaws. These were solutions to real problems. But here is what happens with solutions. They outlive the problems they were designed to solve. The environment changes. The threats diminish. The circumstances shift. But the solution keeps running. The program keeps executing. The pattern keeps repeating. And what was once protection becomes prison. Stuck is one of the most comfortable words in the human vocabulary. It sounds so innocent, so passive, almost like a medical condition you caught through no fault of your own. I am stuck. People say it with a sigh, with resignation, with just enough sadness to signal that they wish things were different, while simultaneously doing nothing to make them so. And the word itself provides the perfect alibi. Because if you are stuck, then movement is not your responsibility. If you are stuck, then someone or something else must unstick you. If you are stuck, you get to remain exactly where you are while appearing to want change. Listen to how people use this word. I am stuck in this job. I am stuck in this relationship. I am stuck in this city. I am stuck in this body. I am stuck in this life. The grammar itself, reveals the deception, because stuck implies an external force holding you in place. It implies that you are a passive victim of circumstances beyond your control. It removes agency. It denies choice. It transforms an active, ongoing decision into a static, unchangeable condition. But here is what no one tells you about that word. Stuck is almost never a description of reality. It is a description of unwillingness disguised as inability. It is a story the mind creates to protect you from a much harder truth: that you could move, that you could change, that the door has been unlocked this entire time, and you have been standing in front of it, hand on the knob, choosing not to turn it. Choosing. That word probably creates resistance in you right now. Because if you are choosing this, then you are responsible for this. And responsibility feels heavy. Responsibility feels like blame. Responsibility means you cannot point to external circumstances anymore. You cannot say it is your childhood, your boss, your partner, your bank account, the economy, the system. You cannot outsource the burden of your life to forces outside yourself. And yet, there is something profoundly liberating hidden inside that responsibility. Because if you have been choosing this, even unconsciously, then you can choose differently. If your current situation is the result of decisions you have made, then different decisions will create different situations. The very thing that feels like condemnation is actually the key to freedom. Let that land for a moment. Not because it should make you feel guilty. Guilt is useless here. Guilt is just another way of staying stuck, another way of avoiding forward movement by drowning in backward-looking self-recrimination. Guilt says you should have known better, should have done better, should have been better, and maybe that is true. But should have is a fantasy. It is a story about a past that does not exist anymore. The only moment that matters is this one. The only choice that matters is the next one. So let go of guilt. Let go of shame. Let go of the need to justify why you have been where you have been. None of that matters. What matters is recognizing the choice, seeing it clearly, acknowledging that every day you wake up and recreate the same patterns, you are voting for them. You are saying yes to them. You are choosing them. Even when the choice feels unconscious. Even when the choice feels automatic. Even when the choice was so long ago that it no longer feels like a choice at all. It is still a choice. And choices can be unmade. But they can only be unmade by someone willing to see them clearly. The reason this matters, the reason I am starting here, is because everything else depends on it. Every transformation, every breakthrough, every moment of genuine change in a human life begins with this single recognition. I am choosing this, not as an indictment, not as a judgment, but as a statement of fact, a reclamation of power, a return to agency. Because once you see that you are choosing, once you really see it, you cannot unsee it. And once you cannot unsee it, continuing to choose the same thing becomes exponentially harder. The unconscious agreement becomes conscious. The automatic pattern becomes deliberate. And deliberate patterns require justification in a way that automatic ones do not. This is the beginning of transformation. Not some dramatic moment of revelation, not some lightning bolt of insight. Just this quiet recognition. I am doing this. I am creating this. I am choosing this. And if I am choosing it, I can choose something else. So let us look clearly. Let us examine what is actually happening when you say you are stuck. When you feel that familiar sensation of being trapped in a life that does not quite fit. When you wake up with that low-grade dissatisfaction humming beneath everything you do. When you go through the motions of your days feeling like you are watching yourself from a slight distance. Present but not really there. Alive but not really living. What is actually occurring in those moments is not imprisonment. It is loyalty. Deep, unconscious, fiercely protective loyalty to a version of yourself that once served a purpose. A version that learned how to survive. A version that figured out the rules of whatever game you were playing and got good enough at playing it to make it this far. That version of you is not your enemy. It did its job. It kept you safe. It helped you navigate situations that might have overwhelmed you otherwise. It deserves acknowledgement, even gratitude. But it does not deserve to run your life forever. Think about who you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. That person made sense in that context. The strategies they developed, the beliefs they held, the ways they moved through the world, all of it was adaptive for that particular moment in time. But you are not in that moment anymore. The context has changed. The environment has shifted. The threats that once felt so real have either diminished or disappeared entirely. And yet, you are still operating as if they are present. You are still running the same defensive patterns. You are still protecting yourself from dangers that no longer exist. You are still playing a game whose rules no longer apply. And this creates a strange kind of suffering. Not the suffering of active threat, but the suffering of misalignment. The discomfort of using outdated software to navigate current reality. Your nervous system does not know the difference between then and now. It does not have access to calendars or context. It only knows patterns. It only knows what has been repeated enough times to become automatic. And if the pattern that got repeated was stay small, stay quiet, do not take risks, do not trust too much, do not want too much, then that pattern will keep running until you consciously interrupt it. This is where everything gets complicated, because the part of you that learned to survive is not separate from you. It is not a foreign entity you can simply remove. It is woven into your nervous system, your habits, your automatic responses, your sense of who you are. When you think about changing, when you imagine becoming someone different, living a different life, making different choices, that survival self does not hear possibility. It hears threat. It hears danger. It hears the potential destruction of everything it worked so hard to build. And so it resists. Not maliciously, not because it wants to hold you back, but because resistance is its job. It was designed to keep things stable. It was designed to maintain the known. It was designed to protect you from the uncertainty that change always brings. The problem is that what once protected you is now imprisoning you. The walls that kept danger out are now keeping growth in. The stability that felt like safety has become a cage so familiar you have forgotten it has bars. Imagine for a moment that you are a plant. You have been growing in a particular pot for years. The pot was the right size once. It gave you structure, boundaries, protection. But you kept growing. Your roots kept expanding. And now those same walls that once supported you are constricting you. They are limiting your growth. They are preventing you from accessing the nutrients you need. But the pot does not know this. The pot is just doing its job. Being a container, providing structure. You are the pot and the plant simultaneously. Part of you has outgrown the container. Part of you is still insisting the container is necessary. And the tension between these two parts creates the experience you call stuck. One part pushing for expansion. One part pulling towards safety. One part ready to grow. One part terrified of what growth might cost. This is why people stay in situations they have outgrown. Not because they are weak, not because they lack intelligence or awareness, but because the part of them responsible for survival has not received the message that survival is no longer the primary goal. It is still operating as if the threats from years ago, decades ago, are still present. It is still running old programs designed for old circumstances, and those programs, those automatic patterns, feel so natural that most people mistake them for truth. I am just not good at taking risks. I am just someone who needs security. I am just not the kind of person who makes big changes. These are not facts. These are programs, stories written by a younger version of you to explain why staying small felt necessary. And they made sense at the time. They were adaptive. They were intelligent responses to whatever environment you were navigating. But you are not in that environment anymore. The rules have changed. The threats have shifted. And yet the programming remains, running in the background, shaping every decision without your conscious awareness. Watch how this plays out in real time. You get an idea, an impulse towards something new, a flash of possibility. Maybe it is a career change. Maybe it is ending a relationship that has run its course. Maybe it is moving to a new place. Maybe it is starting a creative project. Maybe it is simply speaking a truth you have been avoiding. For a moment, the idea feels exciting. For a moment, you can see it. You can feel what it would be like to move in that direction. And then, almost immediately, the resistance arrives. Not as a voice saying, "Do not do this." That would be too obvious, too easy to argue with. No, it arrives as reason, as logic, as practical concern. You start thinking about all the ways it could go wrong, all the obstacles, all the risks. You start cataloging evidence for why it is not the right time, why you are not ready, why it would be irresponsible to proceed. And these thoughts feel true. They feel like wisdom. They feel like your mature, rational mind protecting you from foolishness. But look closer. Look at what is actually happening beneath the reasonable-sounding objections. What you will find is fear, not rational assessment of risk, just fear. The old familiar fear that has been running your life for so long, you have learned to dress it up in logic. This is what it actually means to be stuck. Not that movement is impossible, but that the part of you responsible for movement has been overruled by the part of you responsible for protection. And until you understand this dynamic, until you see it clearly, you will keep experiencing the same pattern. The desire for change, the initial motivation, the first few steps forward, and then the invisible hand pulling you back. The sudden doubt, the convenient excuse, the return to familiar territory. How many times have you experienced this cycle? How many times have you felt the pull towards something new, taken a few steps, and then found yourself right back where you started? And each time there was a reason, a good reason, a legitimate reason. But if you look at all those reasons together, if you see the pattern, what becomes clear is that the reasons are not the real reason. The real reason is that change feels dangerous to your nervous system. And your nervous system will find whatever justification it needs to keep you safe. Safe. That word deserves examination too. Because what does safe actually mean? For most people, safe means familiar. It means predictable. It means knowing what to expect. But familiar is not the same as good. Predictable is not the same as fulfilling. Knowing what to expect is not the same as wanting what you are expecting. You can be safe and miserable. You can be safe and numb. You can be safe and slowly dying inside. Safety, in the way your nervous system understands it, has nothing to do with your happiness, your growth, your fulfillment, your purpose. It only has to do with survival, with maintaining the known, with avoiding the uncertain. And uncertainty is the thing your system fears most. More than pain, more than failure, more than loss. Because pain, failure, and loss are at least known quantities. You have experienced them before. You know you can survive them. But uncertainty offers no such guarantees. Uncertainty means you do not know what is coming. You do not know if you can handle it. You do not know if you will survive. So your system does everything in its power to avoid uncertainty. It keeps you in the known, even when the known is painful. It keeps you in the familiar, even when the familiar is limiting. It keeps you in patterns that no longer serve you because at least they are patterns you understand. If this is resonating with you, if you are feeling something shift inside as you hear these words, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue this journey together. Breathe into this for a moment. Not because I want you to feel bad about the pattern, but because awareness is the beginning of everything. You cannot change what you cannot see, and most people cannot see this because it is too close. It is too woven into the fabric of daily experience. It feels like reality rather than interpretation. It feels like the way things are rather than the way you have been constructing them. But here's the thing about construction. What has been built can be rebuilt. What has been learned can be unlearned. The programs running your life are not permanent installations. They are habits. Deeply grooved habits, yes. Neurologically reinforced habits, absolutely. But habits nonetheless. And habits respond to one thing above all others: repetition. The same mechanism that created your current patterns can create new ones. The same neurological process that made your limitations feel natural can make expansion feel natural. Your brain is not fixed. Your nervous system is not static. Every single day, with every single choice, you are either reinforcing old pathways or creating new ones. You are either voting for who you have been or who you are becoming. And this happens at the micro level, not through grand gestures, not through dramatic transformations, but through small, repeated choices. The choice to speak when you would normally stay silent. The choice to try when you would normally retreat. The choice to stay present when you would normally dissociate. The choice to feel when you would normally numb. Each of these choices is a single vote, a single repetition, and one repetition changes nothing. But 100 repetitions start to create a pathway. 1,000 repetitions make that pathway familiar. 10,000 repetitions make it automatic. This is how you built the patterns you have now, and this is how you will build new ones. But it requires something most people are unwilling to give. It requires moving before you feel ready. It requires action in the absence of certainty. It requires doing the thing while still confused about whether it is the right thing. This is where most people stop. This is the precise location where the majority of human potential goes to die. Not in the absence of desire, not in the absence of awareness, but in the gap between knowing and doing, in the space between understanding what needs to change and actually changing it. People wait. They wait for clarity. They wait for confidence. They wait for the fear to subside. They wait for some external signal that now is the time, that this is the moment, that everything will work out. But that signal never comes. Not in the way they are waiting for it. Not as some unmistakable green light from the universe giving permission to proceed. The signal they are waiting for does not exist because it cannot exist. Because certainty is not available in advance. Because clarity is not something you find before you move. It is something you create by moving. Let me say that again because it contradicts almost everything you have been taught. Clarity comes after movement, not before. Confidence comes after action, not before. The feeling of readiness comes after you have already begun, not as a prerequisite for beginning. Think about learning to swim. You do not become confident in the water by standing on the shore analyzing swimming technique. You do not develop clarity about how to move through water by reading books about it. You become confident by getting in. By moving. By discovering through direct experience what works and what does not. The clarity comes from the doing. The confidence emerges from the practice. And yet, when it comes to life changes, people reverse this process. They think they need to have it all figured out first. They think they need to know exactly how things will unfold before they take the first step. They think they need to feel confident before they act. And so they wait. And while they wait, they stay stuck. Not because movement is impossible, but because they have made movement conditional on things that only movement can provide. This is perhaps the most important thing I can tell you, the most counterintuitive and yet the most consistently true. You will never feel ready for the things that matter most. You will never have enough information. You will never have enough certainty. The gap between where you are and where you want to be will always look terrifying from this side. It will always seem too wide to cross. The other side will always be shrouded in fog. And that is not a problem to be solved. That is simply how growth works. Look at any significant transition in your life. Any real change you have made. Did you feel ready beforehand? Did you have complete clarity? Did you know with certainty that things would work out? Or did you move despite not knowing? Did you take the step even though you could not see the ground beneath it? Did you trust that you would figure it out as you went? Every meaningful change happens in uncertainty. Every transformation requires a leap. Not because there is something noble about leaping, but because the nature of transformation is that you cannot know what it will be like until you are in it. You cannot understand the other side from this side. You cannot experience the new while still clinging to the old. Everyone who has ever done anything meaningful did it while uncertain. Everyone who has ever transformed their life did it without knowing how things would turn out. Everyone who has ever stepped into a larger version of themselves did it scared. The difference between them and everyone else is not the presence of fear. It is the willingness to move anyway. The decision to proceed with uncertainty rather than waiting for uncertainty to resolve. Because uncertainty does not resolve through waiting. It resolves through engagement. You do not figure out if you can handle something by thinking about it. You figure it out by doing it. You do not discover your capacity by analyzing it. You discover it by testing it. The only way to know what is on the other side of fear is to walk through fear. There are no shortcuts. There are no guarantees. There is only the choice to move or the choice to stay. And both choices have costs. This is what people forget. They think staying where they are is the safe option. They think maintaining the status quo is neutral. They think that if they just keep doing what they have been doing, at least nothing bad will happen. But stagnation is not neutral. Stagnation has a price. And the price is paid in ways so subtle, so gradual, that most people do not notice until the bill comes due. It shows up as resentment. That slow-burning irritation at life. at others, at yourself. It shows up as exhaustion. Not the kind that comes from doing too much, but the kind that comes from suppressing too much. It shows up as that hollow feeling when you accomplish something that should matter, but somehow does not. It shows up as watching other people live fully while you observe from a safe distance. It shows up as the growing suspicion that you are slowly disappearing from your own life. This is the cost of staying. This is what you pay when you choose familiar discomfort over unfamiliar growth. And you pay it every single day. Not in one dramatic moment of loss, but in the 1,000 small moments where you could have been present but were not. Where you could have felt alive but did not. Where you could have been yourself but settled for a performance instead. The resentment is particularly insidious because it does not announce itself as the cost of your own choices. It disguises itself as something being done to you. You resent your job, but you are the one staying in it. You resent your partner, but you are the one avoiding the difficult conversation. You resent your life, but you are the one recreating it every day. The resentment feels justified. It feels like a reasonable response to unreasonable circumstances. But underneath it, if you are honest, is the recognition that you are complicit, that you are choosing this, that you are trading your aliveness for the comfort of the known. And that recognition, when it finally breaks through, is devastating. Because it means you cannot blame anyone anymore. You cannot point to external forces. You cannot claim victimhood. You have to acknowledge that you have been doing this to yourself, that every day you have been choosing the cage, that the prison you have been complaining about has an unlocked door you have been refusing to open. The nervous system prefers predictable pain to unpredictable relief. This is not a flaw in your design. This is how survival works. Your brain is not optimized for happiness. It is not optimized for fulfillment. It is not optimized for growth or meaning or purpose. It is optimized for keeping you alive. And from a pure survival perspective, the known is always safer than the unknown, even if the known is painful, even if the known is limiting, even if the known is slowly killing your spirit. At least you know how much it hurts. At least you know what to expect. At least you have developed strategies for managing it. The unknown offers no such guarantees. The unknown could be better, but it could also be worse. And to a nervous system designed for survival, worse is the only possibility that matters. This is why change feels so threatening. Not because of the effort involved, not because of the practical challenges, but because change asks you to trade the known for the unknown. It asks you to release your grip on what you can predict in exchange for what you cannot. It asks you to trust that you can handle whatever comes, even though you have no evidence that you can. And underneath all of that, change asks something even more fundamental. It asks you to let go of who you have been. This is the part that nobody talks about. The part that makes transformation so much harder than simple behavior change. When you change your life, you are not just changing your circumstances. You are changing your identity. You are letting go of a version of yourself that has been running the show for years, maybe decades. A version that has its own preferences, its own fears, its own ways of making sense of the world. That version of you is not going to step aside quietly. It is not going to cheer you on as you become someone new. It is going to fight. It is going to resist. It is going to find 1,000 creative ways to pull you back to familiar territory. Not because it is evil, not because it wants you to suffer, but because from its perspective, its survival is at stake. And in a way, it is right. The person you are becoming cannot coexist with the person you have been. They cannot share the same life. One of them has to go. And even though the version you are leaving behind may be limited, may be small, may be causing you suffering, it is still you. It is still the self you have known. And letting it go feels like a kind of death. Because it is a kind of death. Not physical death, but ego death. The dissolution of a constructed identity. The ending of a story you have been telling about who you are. And even when that story is painful, even when that identity is limiting, there is grief in letting it go. Because it is familiar, because it is known, because it has been your companion, your protection, your way of navigating the world. This is why people hesitate at the threshold of change. This is why they get so close and then pull back. This is why they start and stop, advance and retreat, again and again. It is not laziness. It is not weakness. It is the very human fear of losing yourself, the terror of not knowing who you will be on the other side. Who will I be if I am not the person who plays it safe? Who will I be if I am not the person who needs approval? Who will I be if I am not the person who stays small? These questions feel existential because they are. Your sense of self, your identity, your understanding of who you are is built on patterns. And when you change the patterns, you change the self. This is terrifying, and it should be. Because you are not just rearranging furniture. You are demolishing the house and building a new one. You are not just updating software. You are changing the operating system. You are not just making different choices. You are becoming a different person. But here is what I want you to understand. What you are afraid of losing is not your true self. It is a constructed self, a self built from circumstances, from conditioning, from the need to adapt and survive. That self was useful, that self was necessary, but that self was never the whole truth of who you are. It was a role you learned to play, a character you developed for a particular stage. And now the stage is changing. The play is different. And the character that served you so well in the previous act cannot serve you in this one. It is not that you are killing yourself by changing. It is that you are finally allowing a larger version of yourself to emerge. A version that was always there, waiting beneath the surface, waiting for permission to exist. Think of it like this. You are not a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. You are a butterfly that has been pretending to be a caterpillar. The transformation is not about becoming something you are not. It is about shedding what you never were. It is about removing the layers of protection, adaptation, and performance that you accumulated in order to survive. It is about revealing what was always underneath. And what is underneath is not small. It is not limited. It is not afraid. What is underneath is vast, capable, powerful. The version of you that exists before the conditioning, before the trauma, before the 1,000 small compromises you made to be accepted, to be loved, to be safe. That version is still there. Waiting. Ready. It has always been ready. But it cannot emerge while you are defending the constructed version. It cannot come through while you are loyal to the limited identity. It cannot be born while you are still protecting the old self. If you are feeling this truth move through you, if you sense that you are ready to stop being a prisoner of old frequencies and start becoming a conscious transmitter, What we have explored today only touches the surface. In my book, Beyond the Frequencies, A Quantum Guide to Consciousness Mastery, I walk you through the complete system for breaking free from survival static and moving from unconscious to conscious transmission. It is linked in the pinned comment below. I want to pause here and ask you something. What version of yourself have you been protecting that you know has already served its purpose? Drop your answer in the comments below. There is power in naming it, in speaking it aloud to this community. Pause with that. You are not becoming someone new. You are becoming more of who you already are. The change you fear is not destruction. It is revelation. It is the removal of everything that was never really you in the first place. The masks, the adaptations, the performances. What remains when those fall away is not emptiness. It is essence. But you will not experience this by thinking about it. You will not understand it through analysis. The only way to know what is on the other side of transformation is to transform. The only way to meet the larger version of yourself is to stop clinging to the smaller one. This brings us to the heart of everything. The place where understanding must become action, where insight must become movement, where the recognition that you have been choosing this life must become the decision to choose differently. And I want to be very clear about what decision means here, because it does not mean what most people think it means. Decision does not mean feeling motivated. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings come and go. You cannot build a life on motivation any more than you can build a house on clouds. Motivation will abandon you the moment resistance appears. It will evaporate the moment the work gets hard. If you wait for motivation to move, you will wait forever. Think about all the times you have felt motivated. That surge of energy, that clarity of purpose, that sense that this time will be different. It feels so real in the moment. It feels like the beginning of real change. And for a day or two, maybe even a week, you ride that wave. You take action, you make progress, you feel like you are finally breaking through. And then the motivation fades, as it always does. And when it fades, you stop. You tell yourself you have lost the drive, lost the inspiration, lost the momentum. You tell yourself you will start again when the motivation returns. But what you are really saying is that you are only willing to move when movement feels easy, that you are only willing to change when change feels good, that you are only willing to grow when growth does not require effort. And that is not how transformation works. Transformation requires you to move, especially when you do not feel like moving. It requires you to show up, especially when showing up feels hard. It requires you to choose the new pattern, especially when the old pattern feels easier. Decision does not mean feeling confident. Confidence is the result of action, not the prerequisite for it. You become confident by doing things you were not confident about. That is the only way confidence is built. Waiting to feel confident before you act is like waiting to feel full before you eat. Confidence is earned through repetition, through doing the thing enough times that it becomes familiar. Through proving to yourself, through direct experience, that you can handle it. But you cannot prove that to yourself without first attempting it. And you cannot attempt it if you are waiting to feel confident first. So you have to be willing to be incompetent. You have to be willing to be awkward. You have to be willing to fumble and fail and look foolish. You have to be willing to do the thing badly before you can do it well. And most people are not willing. Most people would rather not try at all than try and be imperfect. They would rather preserve the fantasy of competence than risk the reality of learning. But learning always involves incompetence. Growth always involves awkwardness. Change always involves a period where you do not know what you are doing. And if you are not willing to move through that period, you will never arrive at mastery. You will never build confidence. You will stay forever on the shore, watching other people swim, telling yourself you would get in the water if only you felt more confident. Decision does not mean having a plan. Plans are useful, but they are also ways of postponing. People spend years perfecting plans they never execute. They research and strategize and prepare, and somehow the preparation never ends. There is always one more thing to figure out. One more piece of information to gather. The plan becomes a hiding place, a sophisticated form of avoidance dressed up as responsibility. I am not ready to start yet. I need to do more research. I need to learn more. I need to prepare more. These statements sound reasonable. They sound like wisdom. But look at what they actually accomplish. They keep you from taking action. They keep you in the comfortable realm of thinking rather than the uncomfortable realm of doing. They allow you to feel productive while producing nothing. Planning has diminishing returns. At a certain point, more planning does not increase your chances of success. It just increases your chances of never starting. Because the more detailed your plan becomes, the more ways you can imagine it going wrong. The more contingencies you prepare for, the more obstacles you see. The more you try to eliminate uncertainty, the more uncertain you feel. Real decision is simpler than all of that, and harder. Real decision is the moment when you stop negotiating with yourself. When you stop weighing options, when you stop asking whether you should and simply acknowledge that you will. It is a shift that happens inside, often without fanfare, often without drama. One moment you are considering, the next moment you are committed, and everything changes. Not externally, not yet, but internally, everything changes, because commitment reorganizes consciousness. It tells your brain that this is no longer optional. It tells your nervous system that the old patterns are no longer in charge. It creates a new organizing principle for your life, and everything begins to align around it. This is what people misunderstand about change. They think it happens through effort, through willpower, through forcing yourself to do things you do not want to do. But real change happens through alignment, through bringing all parts of yourself into agreement about what matters, through making a decision so complete that resistance becomes irrelevant. Not because resistance disappears, it does not, but because you are no longer in negotiation with it. You are no longer asking resistance for permission. You have simply decided that you are moving forward, and resistance can come along for the ride if it wants, but it is not driving anymore. Imagine you are standing at a crossroads. One path leads back to the familiar, the other leads toward the unknown. For months, maybe years, you have been standing at this crossroads, weighing the options, considering the pros and cons, imagining what each path might hold. And the whole time you have been standing there, you have been suffering, not from making the wrong choice, but from not making any choice. Decision ends that suffering, not by guaranteeing the outcome, but by ending the internal debate. You choose a path, you commit to it, and suddenly the energy that was being consumed by indecision becomes available for movement. Suddenly, you are no longer stuck at the crossroads. You are walking, And even if you are walking toward uncertainty, even if you are walking toward difficulty, there is relief in the movement itself. This is the shift that changes everything, and it is available to you right now. Not tomorrow. Not when circumstances improve. Not when you feel ready. Now. The question is not whether you are capable of making this shift. You are. The question is whether you are willing. Whether you are willing to stop defending the life you have outgrown. Whether you are willing to stop protecting the version of yourself that has done its job. Whether you are willing to step into uncertainty without knowing what you will find there. Because that is what this requires. Not certainty. Willingness. Willingness to be confused. Willingness to make mistakes. Willingness to look foolish. Willingness to fail. Willingness to succeed. Willingness to become someone you do not yet recognize. Willingness to lose the familiar in exchange for the possible. This is the price of transformation, not effort. Willingness, and here is the thing about willingness. It does not require you to feel willing. It only requires you to act willing. You can be terrified and willing at the same time. You can be doubtful and willing at the same time. You can have every part of your nervous system screaming at you to stop and still take the next step. That is what courage actually is, not the absence of fear, the presence of movement despite fear. So let us talk about movement. Let us talk about what it actually looks like to proceed with uncertainty. Because this is where the abstract becomes concrete, where philosophy becomes practice, where everything we have been discussing either becomes real or remains just another set of ideas that made you feel something for an hour and then faded. Movement does not mean you need to change everything at once. That is another trap. The belief that transformation requires dramatic upheaval, that you need to quit your job, leave your relationship, move to a new city, reinvent yourself completely. Sometimes that is true, but more often, transformation happens through smaller movements, consistent movements, movements that do not look impressive but accumulate over time. The person you are becoming is not built in a single dramatic gesture. They are built in the 1,000 small choices you make every day. The choice to speak when you would normally stay silent. The choice to stay silent when you would normally fill the space with noise. The choice to do the thing that scares you rather than the thing that soothes you. The choice to be honest when dishonesty would be easier. These small movements do not feel significant in the moment. They feel almost trivial. But they are not trivial. They are the building blocks of identity. Every time you choose differently, you are laying down new neural pathways. You are teaching your nervous system that a different way of being is possible. You are proving to yourself through action that you are not who you thought you were. And over time, these small movements compound. They accumulate. They create momentum. And momentum is the thing that makes transformation sustainable. Not willpower, not motivation. Momentum. The sense that you are already in motion, that stopping would require more effort than continuing. This is why the first step is the hardest. Not because it is the biggest, but because it is the one that creates momentum. Once you are moving, staying in motion becomes easier. But getting started requires overcoming inertia. It requires pushing against everything that has been keeping you still. So push, not tomorrow, now, not dramatically, quietly. Take one step, Make one choice. Do one thing differently. It does not matter how small. What matters is that you move. What matters is that you break the pattern. What matters is that you prove to yourself that movement is possible. Because that is what you are really afraid of, is it not? Not that change is hard, but that you might not be capable of it, that you might try and fail, that you might discover that you really are stuck after all, that the story you have been telling yourself is true. But the only way to disprove that story is to act against it. The only way to know you are capable of change is to change. And you cannot do that by thinking. You cannot do that by planning. You cannot do that by waiting until you feel ready. You can only do that by moving. So move. And when you move, expect resistance. Expect the old patterns to reassert themselves. Expect to feel pulled back toward the familiar. This is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. This is a sign that you are doing something right. Resistance is the evidence that change is occurring. If there were no resistance, then there would be no transformation. The old version of you will not go quietly. It will whisper doubts. It will magnify fears. It will present compelling arguments for why you should stop, why you should wait, why this is not the right time. And those arguments will feel reasonable. They will feel wise. They will feel like caution rather than cowardice. But you will know the difference. Somewhere beneath the noise, you will know. Because caution feels like wisdom. Cowardice feels like relief. Caution considers and then acts. Cowardice considers and then finds reasons not to. Learn to feel the difference in your body. Learn to recognize when your mind is genuinely protecting you and when it is simply protecting the status quo. And when you recognize that it is the latter, move anyway. This is the practice, not a one-time event, a daily discipline, a constant choosing. Every day you will face the same decision, the familiar or the unknown, the comfortable or the growth-inducing, the person you have been or the person you are becoming, and every day you will have to choose again. This is not a failure of the process. This is the process. Transformation is not something you achieve and then maintain. It is something you practice forever. The version of you that exists on the other side of this is not someone who no longer faces resistance. They are someone who has learned to move through resistance, who has made peace with uncertainty, who has stopped waiting for fear to subside and started acting despite it. That is the only difference between people who transform their lives and people who do not. Not talent, not luck, not circumstances. The willingness to move while still confused. The decision to proceed with uncertainty. And that willingness is available to you right now. Not because your circumstances are perfect. They are not because you have figured everything out. You have not. Not because you feel ready. You do not. But because willingness does not require any of those things. Willingness only requires willingness, the decision to decide, the choice to choose. So let me ask you directly, what are you still defending? What version of your life are you still protecting? What familiar pain are you still choosing over unfamiliar growth? What story are you still telling yourself about why you cannot move? And more importantly, what would happen if you stopped? What would happen if you stopped calling it stuck and started calling it what it is? A life you have outgrown, a version of yourself that has completed its purpose, a chapter that is ready to end. What would happen if you stopped waiting for permission and gave it to yourself? If you stopped waiting for certainty and accepted that it is not coming, if you stopped waiting to feel ready and admitted that readiness is a myth, what would happen if you just moved? I cannot answer that for you. No one can. The other side of transformation is genuinely unknown. That is what makes it terrifying, and that is what makes it real. But I can tell you this. The discomfort you feel right now, the restlessness, the dissatisfaction, the sense that something is not right, that is not a sign that something is wrong with you. That is a sign that something is right with you. That is your deeper intelligence trying to get your attention. That is the part of you that knows you are capable of more, that knows this is not all there is, that knows the life you are living is too small for the person you are becoming. That discomfort is not your enemy. It is your ally. It is the pressure that creates diamonds. It is the tension that precedes breakthrough. It is the signal that expansion is trying to happen, that growth is knocking at the door, that the next version of you is ready to emerge. But it cannot emerge while you are standing guard over the old version. It cannot come through while you are defending the familiar. It cannot be born while you are still protecting what needs to die. So stop protecting, stop defending, stop calling it stuck. You are not stuck. You have never been stuck. You have been choosing. And now you can choose differently. Not because I said so, not because anyone gave you permission, but because you are the only one who ever could. The door has been unlocked this entire time. Your hand has been on the knob, and the only thing that has been keeping you from turning it is the belief that you could not. But you can. You always could. And somewhere, beneath all the noise, beneath all the fear, beneath all the stories you have been telling yourself, you know this. Tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you are finally ready to stop protecting? What door are you ready to open? Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. So turn the knob, open the door, step through, and discover what has been waiting for you on the other side. Not certainty, not guarantees, not the absence of fear, but something better. The experience of being fully alive, the feeling of moving towards something that matters, the recognition that you are not a victim of your circumstances, but the author of your life. That is what waits on the other side of this decision. Not perfection, but aliveness. Not answers, but engagement. Not the end of struggle, but the beginning of meaningful struggle. The kind that builds rather than diminishes. The kind that creates rather than destroys. This is what you have been waiting for. Not a sign, not permission, not the right moment. Just this. The recognition that you are already capable, already worthy, already enough. And the decision to act like it. Consider coming back to this message each morning as you begin your day. Let it remind you of what you are choosing. And if someone in your life is standing at their own threshold, share this with them. When you help awaken someone else to their own power, you strengthen your own. That is how consciousness works. What you give, you receive. What you share, you become. So act, not tomorrow, now. The person you are becoming is waiting, and they have been waiting long enough. Speaking of becoming, there is something you need to understand about why transformation sometimes feels like everything goes silent. Watch when you shift timelines. The field goes quiet. to understand what is actually happening in those moments when you take action and the universe seems to pause. It will change how you interpret the silence.